you for coming. So today's presentation is about prescribing infusions on MEDCHART, because as of next Monday the 8th of June, we are going to start a pilot, essentially, of prescribing 3 medicines on MEDCHART: morphine, prostin, and scamp. With the aim of, if it's successful, which I hopefully will be, of putting more infusions onto MEDCHART and removing paper. So the aim of this is to go electronic with everything. But the idea being as well is that the pumps are smart pumps, which are programmed with the standard concentration syringes. So as long as the weight of the baby is correct, it will deliver the defined dose. And currently, we will transcribe that information into Badger, but in time, the pumps will feed the information into Badger as well, so they should all talk to each other. Great. Sorry, Connor, can you move on to the next slide? Thank you. So this bit will be slightly less relevant to you because it's about prescribing. But essentially, if anybody asks you about prescribing, this is how you go and do it. So all the will be stored in the protocols folder. So you can see on the tab on MEDCHART, you have in the medication tab, you've got prescribe, quick list, and protocol. So the doctors are very familiar with using the quick lists because they use them most of the time. But they also use the protocols for certain things like prescribing medications for pre-intubation, medications for neuropathy of prematurity. So this is just extra tab that they click on. It's number 3 here. It's called neonatal protocols. And then you can't quite see it. Let me see if I can move this out of the way. Will this move? This thing. There we are. So what happens as well when they get infusions, the drop-down menu will appear. And what we've done is we've categorized the prescriptions into weights. So there will be an option for babies less than 1 kilo, options for babies who weigh between 1 and 2 kilos, and options for babies that weigh 2 to 5 kilos. And the parental nutrition prescriptions are in their own separate folder below as well. So the main thing is the doctor obviously goes into the folder, gets the correct list depending on the baby's weight. And then it will also then open up and give them more options depending on whether they want to prescribe a drug for analgesia or a cardiovascular drug. So we've separated them out further. So there's lots of drop-down menus that will appear. Connor, could you move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So for this example, if you were to go into the analgesia folder, your options would be morphine. And for babies that weigh less than 1 kilo, there's only one option that should pop up, which will be the standard concentration 1 milligram in 20 ml infusion. And it will look, sorry, I don't know if you can see that, it will look like this, it's a bit small on the screen. So it's a 1 milligram in glucose 5% made up to 20. So that is exactly the same as it currently appear on a sticker on paper. And it will tell you the infusion will be between 5 to 20 mics per kilo per hour, which again is the same as what we currently have on our stickers. So it matches what we currently do, it's just an electronic format. And it will say the initial starting dose per kilo per hour, and the doctor will then need to click on add, and it will then go to the next screen. And here it will, it's a little bit different and a bit confusing, but bear with us. What it will now is the rate that it is infused. What we're used to seeing is it infused in micrograms per kilogram per hour, which is there, but the first bit that appears is the actual just micrograms, which will be the amount of morphine the baby is getting. So that is new information that we're not used to seeing at the minute because we don't normally have that written down. But essentially, if you wanted to double check it, if you did the calculation, it would match this infusion, which is 5 to 20 mics per kilo per hour. It's just that MEDCHART has calculated that for you based on the baby's weight. So the most important thing is that the baby's weight is up to date in MEDCHART. And then it would also show you further down the rate that it's infused at. And again, it presents in micrograms of morphine per hour first, which we're not used to seeing. But then this is the bit we're used to seeing. It's in mils per hour. So it match what's in the pump. So this should match how it's being infused in the pumps. And the other thing just to mention is that MEDCHART will calculate the rate to 3 decimal places, which is excessive and pumps aren't accurate enough to go to 3 decimal places. But if you were to round it to what the pump will do, it will be 0.09. Even that is too low. It can't be infused at that lower rate, to say 0.36 or 37. But it'll match. And then here, it will default to the current time. So say we prescribe it now, it would default to this time, but this can be changed at any time you want. So we were having a in the teaching session yesterday about maybe having a default time. So maybe having set it to 8 o'clock in the evening, or 10 o'clock in the evening, whatever time the nurses and the doctors want it to be at, essentially. But they can either prescribe it for now, during the day, if it's to be changed now, or they can prescribe it for now and leave it. It's just once this time has passed, the little clock will appear indicating that it's overdue. So if it's not to be due to be changed until the night, it's probably best to prescribe the time later on in the day. And the doctor would then have to click on continue. And then the final step that you need to do to get it into MEDCHART is you click on continue and then you click on update. And then that's it. The prescription is done. It will appear in MEDCHART like this. And then once it's running, once the nurse has put in all the details to say it's running, it will also have this additional window appearing, which has got a little running man on it, saying that the infusion is running, and it will tell you the date and the time it was started at, and it will tell you the current rate that it's running at as well in mils per hour. Okay, and that can be titrated up and down on the pump and on budget. It doesn't need to be re-prescribed every time in MEDCHART. For example, now when we use the sticker has a range on it of say between 5 to 20 mics per kilo per hour, and every time the baby's dose of morphine goes up or down depending on how much they need, we don't get a new prescription. It just automatically gets updated in budget and it's recorded there. This prescription will then stay on the chart until it's seized by a prescriber or completed by an administrator. So currently we have to get the prescription re-prescribed every 48 hours so that we can put up a new syringe. That would be the case with MEDCHART. Once it's on there, it's on there and it will stay on there. And during that period, the infusion syringe can be changed as many times as it needs to be changed. So it'll still be a 48-hour maximum on the syringes because they're made in pharmacy. And then the other thing to mention is they can stay on the same prescription unless the price changes considerably. So say, for example, they're on more for a number of weeks and they move into the next category up. So say they start off when they're really small and tiny and they're like 1 point something kilos, but then they grow and they're still on morphine when they're 2.5 kilos. You probably want to seize this prescription and re-prescribe it using the higher concentrations. Okay. Connor, do you mind moving to the next slide? Thank you. So that would be the case for babies who weigh less than 1 kilo. If you've got a baby who weighs, say, 1.5 kilos, you have the option of which morphine syringe to prescribe. So the same as what we currently have with the stickers, the doctors have an option of choosing between the 1 milligram of 20 ml or the 4 milligram of 20 ml. So in that charge. And then you can see what it would look like here. So say, for example, you go for the second option and you go for the range of 5 to 20 mics per kilo per hour. This is what it would look like. Okay, but you can see that you probably won't be using that at the lower dose because you cannot infuse that at 0.03 mils per hour. So that would probably indicate to you that you should use the more dilute syringe because you physically can't. So hopefully the prescribers notice that, or the nurses will point it out to them and go, and they'll select the other option. Okay. Thanks for the next slide, please. So yeah, as this slide says, the minimum flow rate the pump can generate is 0.1 mil an hour. So if obviously you're getting options which are lower than that, then you will need to think about changing your syringe. Okay, hopefully that's self-explanatory. Yeah, so if you want to change it, it's best not to, for the prescribers out there, it's best not to meddle with the prescription and to fiddle with it. If you're going to change the syringe, just seize the prescription that you've selected if you've made a mistake and select the correct option the second time around. Don't go playing around with the information that's in the prescription because it's been set up to match exactly the syringes that we have. Thanks, Benna. So the other medication that we're going to use on MEDCHART is dinoprostone. This is pretty straightforward, actually. There's not, this isn't too complicated at all, mainly because it only comes as one strength, which is the 50 micrograms in 50 mils. So you just follow the same steps and it'll come up under cardiovascular. The thing to bear in mind with the dinoprostone syringes is that, again, you think about your minimum rate. So say, for example, you have a baby who's got a UVC, the minimum flow rate is 0.5 mils an hour. Or if you've got a baby with a very small line, for example, one French line, which could be a French line, then you want the infusion to run at least 1 mil an hour. So if you're using the standard concentration syringe and you can see that your infusion rate is going to be quite small, so for example, that was 0.2 mils an hour, you would need the prescriber to write up a separate bag of glucose to run alongside it to make up the volume, and that currently still has to be done on paper. So you would have kind of part of the prescription on MEDCHART and part of the prescription on paper. So just bear that in mind. Thanks, Connor. And finally, the last thing we're going to try and prescribe on MEDCHART is SCAMP. The guidance for prescribing SCAMP is available on Clinibi for people who aren't familiar with it, and there should be a summary guide in all the baby's cot side folders, the quick reference guide. So SCAMP is always the same, the baby weighs, so it's got its own separate folder. And these will actually need to be prescribed every 48 hours. We did consider the option of having them set as a default of just to go up after a 48-hour period. However, you know, for some babies, it wouldn't be appropriate for them to automatically jump up to the next amount of SCAMP or the amount of SMOF liquid. So we felt it was more appropriate for the babies to be reviewed at 48 hours, and then for the prescription to be prescribed at that time. Once you reach the full rate, so for example, with SCAMP, that's 100 mils per kilo per day, that infusion is actually valid then for up to 8 days. So you don't need to keep re-prescribing the bags. At which point you would expect, if the baby is still on PN, for the baby to be reviewed. For example, you'd hope that maybe the baby's gained a little bit of weight, and then the prescription can be adjusted according to the new working weight. The other thing to bear in mind as well is that the feeds will obviously be changing during this time period, but the prescription itself doesn't need to be adjusted based on the baby's volume of feeds. So the prescription is kind of like the maximum that can be infused for that baby. But obviously, if they're having part feeds, part PN, then the volume being infused may be slightly less than what's on the prescription, and that's absolutely fine. That will be clearly documented. So you can, you know, you don't have to re-prescribe. Say if your baby is receiving only 80 mils per kilo of the bag, keep it at 100 mils per kilo, and the nurses will titrate against that. So there are 4 options as per the guidelines. So normally we start at 60 mils per kilo per day, then we go up to 75 after 48 hours, then normally up to 90 mils per kilo per day, and then up to the maximum of 100 mils per kilo per day. And that is what you'll see on the MEDCHART infusion tab. You have the options to choose either 60 or 75 or 90 or 100. In general, most babies will start on 60, that's the norm. But say, for example, you have a baby transferred from another unit and they're already on full PN, you can go straight to the 100 mils per kilo per day. You don't have to go back to the beginning and progress upwards, if that makes sense. With SMOF, so you prescribe your SCAMP alongside with your SMOF, there are 3 options, which are 60 12 or 17 mils per kilo per day. And again, we normally titrate upwards every 48 hours as long as the baby's triglyceride levels are okay. And then the 17 mil per kilo per day prescription is valid for up to 10 days, at which point then if the baby's still on PN, you can review and optimize according to the new working weight. Remembering to check the triglyceride levels as per the guideline. And what we're going to do as well is we're going to change the guidance so that when the baby does have a high triglyceride level and you need to step down on the phospholipid, we're just going to have those three options of 6, 12 or 17. So say, for example, you're on 17 mils per kilo per day, your baby has a high triglyceride level, you want to drop down, you would automatically go down to 12. If you repeat it and it's still high, you drop down to 6. So we're going to go up and in those stages. So it's going to be easier then to stack a MEDCHART with three options there. And when babies are on PN for longer than 28 days, this often happens if they've had surgery and they are slow to feed or they have gut issues afterwards. We would automatically expect those after a month to go to lipids over 20 hours to give their livers a break overnight. So there is a separate folder, a separate protocol for those babies. So you can seize the current prescription for the phospholipid and select the over 20 hours option. This minimises the need to fiddle with prescriptions and change the rates. Just seize the current prescription of over 24 hours and select the new prescription over 20 hours. It's in a separate drop-down menu in the folder. So the intravenous nutrition can run for a maximum of 48 hours, but the bag changes need to be aligned to 8 p.m. So some extreme preterm may not be ready for this to be changed if it's early in their second day. So in those instances, the prescriber can prescribe another 60 mils per kilo per day of aqueous and another 6 mils per kilo per day of lipid to start at 8 on their second day and to continue to review this daily. You may then want to extend whilst the bag is running. So the bag is already being infused, but you want to amend the prescription. And this is possible by entering the active infusion. Obviously, you need to then communicate this with your nursing staff. And this is what the page will look like. As you can see, the little green man is running. So this infusion is currently being infused. If you want to change anything, just click on the edit button. And then you can amend the, say you want to change the mils per kilo per day the baby is receiving, you can amend that amount there. Or if you want to change the length of time that amount of volume is being infused over. So say, for example, you want to align with 8 o'clock bag changes, you can change it from 48 to say 36 hours so that the bags are at the same time at night. I would recommend not fiddling with anything else on that page. Just click on edit and you can amend the rate in mils per kilo per day and the time. Try not to touch any of the other buttons if you can avoid it, because it will completely change the prescription. And yeah, you may have to just seize and start again if you accidentally start clicking on those other bits. Just leave it as a rate for a period. Don't touch anything else. So the other flag implementing tasks in Badger and communicating these changes within the medical and the nursing team are essential, because you don't want something to change on MEDCHART and for the nurse not to be aware. And remember that the prescription does not need to be changed according to fee. You can leave the prescription alone, titrate the prescription and document. We said this before, stickers, and we're still using stickers when they didn't need to, but hopefully in MEDCHART we will iron out those problems and people won't go re-prescribing things that they don't need to. And finally, the side arms, like we've mentioned, have to be prescribed on paper. We haven't quite got there in terms of getting the side arms onto Badger yet. With the instruction to total fluids of however many mils per kilo per day. So for example, in this prescription, the total fluids is up to 120 mils per kilo per day. And therefore, again, the nurse can titrate the side arm up or down depending on the feeds the baby is on, but the maximum the baby will receive is 120 mils per kilo per day. And again, document plans clearly in Badger so there's an easy reference to any queries. And that's the end of the talk. Thank you very much for listening. We're just going to have a little play now with the test system, but I think I'll stop recording here. So thanks for your time.